So I'm Matt Caputo, a reporter with the New York Post, and today I just wanted to go through some basic questions that arise kind of when we got some reports about Dickey's franchises. And just to get a better idea, I was wondering what is the protocol for vetting those potential owners that are interested in a Dickey's, and what are the elements of qualification?
Sure. Well, the partnership is the most important part of the franchisee-franchisor relationship. So for us, we don't use the term franchisee internally. We use the term owner-operator. I think that's fundamental to who we are. So we're looking for folks that really want to be in the restaurant business, and specifically in the barbecue business. We're a little bit different than a lot of other concepts that are out there because we have a very hands-on process in the kitchen. So you have to be willing to come in and smoke the meat on site. You have to be comfortable with a hickory wood pit smoker. There's just a lot of physicality to that. There's a lot of specialization where art and science meet. So we're looking for folks that really want to be in the restaurant business, not necessarily professional franchisees that are adding to their portfolio, but really have a passion for barbecue, that really want to take the Dickey's brand and make it their own. So we're looking for folks that share that desire. And then we also have very specific qualifications to make sure that they meet financial minimums, that they have the ability and the desire to work a minimum of 40 hours in the store. Even when we have partnerships, which we do have, that will come in with more than one folks as a partnership or something like that, there has to be someone with equity in the partnership that will agree to be an owner operator and be active in the store. And Gruber, you can add anything, but that's our typical kind of profile for someone that joins us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the only thing I would add is just mechanically speaking, there's there's a formal application that the prospective franchisee completes. We run a pretty comprehensive background check and just sort of check on depending on the market they're looking for, the type of store they're looking for. It's sort of we kind of tailor the specifications for whatever their situation is. Like building out a second generation space is going to be different than building a standalone building from the ground up. And so that's sort of like looking at the their ability to complete the project that they're interested in completing with us.
You run credit, background, criminal, all of those sorts of things to make sure.
Yeah. Right. What kind of, when you consider people that want to join the brand and be partners with you, franchisees, what kind of food experience do you look for? Do you usually look for people who cooked in a restaurant, operated restaurants? How does that factor into qualifications on your end?
Yeah, it's a nice to have. It's certainly something that we discuss with folks, but it's not a hard and fast requirement. For example, our two original franchisees, literally number one and number two, that are both still with the brand, neither came to us with direct restaurant experience. And so we have a wide range of folks with a lot of different experience. We'll have some folks that have always worked for someone else and want to be in business for themselves. We'll have folks want to get out of a traditional office setting. And then we certainly do have folks that have other brands, that have brand portfolios, that have a lot of experience. So it really does run the
gamut. When did Dickey's just for kind of practical terms, when did Dickey's start to franchise nationally and kind of leave that Texas footprint?
1994. So we started franchising then. And our first out of Texas franchise was in Colorado, which still is open and operating.
Wow, the first one. That's kind of impressive. So a couple of things. One thing that came up just kind of learning about what's going on here was that some people, and it was announced on your website twice, some people on Long Island, Mr. Jerry Stefan, and I believe Mr. John Malanconico, had agreements with Dickey's that they were going to potentially open 20 plus stores. How does a deal like that structured? What kind of a deal is this? And what prevented it from happening?
Sure. Both those individuals came to us. They approached us. And so our path to what we would call an area developership is that you can come in and structure that deal, but there are certain requirements along the way that you have to meet before that deal can mature. So, for example, actually, in both of the case of those individuals, they opted and really sold themselves and wanted to be area developers. Jerry, for example, wanted to really build out the market in New York and New Jersey. He has a background in construction, so he functioned as his own GC. So his market pitch and market plan for us was that he would come in, he had the expertise to build up the market, he had the intimate market knowledge, and he wanted then to take that, build that success for himself, and then sell and recruit other folks. And we do have several very successful area developers in the brand. Jerry, though, unfortunately didn't ever meet the requirements to move beyond an owner operator of his own locations. So while he built out his and worked there, he really got into the restaurant. And while he might have enjoyed the build out process, he did not successfully make the transition into an owner operator. And so he really decided that was not for him. And so we released him from that agreement. Certainly, even though it slowed our development in the market and tied up the exclusivity in that market for quite a while, we didn't pursue him to fulfill that because we didn't want him to move forward. And so we mutually helped him find John to buy his restaurants.
When a release of that nature takes place from what seems like at least an initial agreement, it's on your website, right? Is there some type of written notification you sent to Jerry Stefan or his lawyer?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, Monica can probably send over. We were able to package a lot of that for you. You can kind of see Jerry's journey with us, if you will, coming in, all of us acting in good faith, really thinking Jerry would be a good fit and a good partner. I think he thought that, we thought that. He successfully built out his restaurants. He did that. It's just when he made the transition from what his previous experience was as a GC and then into the restaurant business, it just was not what his passion was. I know he also had his knee gave him a lot of problems. There's a lot of physicality in what we do, loading the pit, unloading the pit. You've got to be there, before 8 a.m. You have to work all the way through. You're loading those briskets, you're loading those pork butts, you're pulling them out. There's just the restaurant business is hard. And that was not something that he found success. He wasn't able to meet our operational standards. And so we documented that process with him through our Blaze audits, through our ops audits. There was a lot of support and opportunity to try to get Jerry to where we felt he was successful for the brand. And then I think also so he felt he was successful. And we just did not achieve that mutual brand standard there. And so that's why we notified him that he was not able to move forward until he met his current obligations as an individual owner operator. And so that's really where we exited the relationship.
Those obligations, those qualifiers that got him to become an area developer, is that a certain amount of sales, a certain amount of revenue made, or is it something else that would have qualified him to get that deal?
Absolutely. Well, and you can speak to that, River, if you'd like to, but it's at the base level, it is to absolutely meet all brand standards. So he has to be operationally excellent. He has to, and even not just all the way up to excellent, he didn't get to the proficiency level. His guest complaints were out of our model. His operational off-program purchasing was out of model. His Blaze audits, as we call them, his operations audits, he didn't get to passing for us on his single unit. And so we are very much a believer in nail it before you scale it. And so that's why we couldn't get to that successful partnership there. So there was absolutely no reason to expand forward. And Gruber, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, no, again, that was just to speak to the mechanics. Area developer agreements like that are typically the benchmarks are typically based on the number of units in the territory that's being developed. And so there's a timeline. And I think with his, it was anticipated when the deal was set out to last from their start in 2018 and over the course of the next 15 years, develop 15 locations in his defined market. And, you know, like what Laura was just saying is this one just sort of never really got off the ground. So at the time of the deal was being structured, it was about number of units in the territory.
So just to clarify, the number of units in the territory, it would ultimately be, he would build them to flip them essentially to the next person. Is that more or less?
Not necessarily. And that's where it's relationship dependent. In Jerry's specific case, because he was a general contractor and he had that expertise, that was part of the market plan that he offered and said, hey, I can do this. This is part of what would make me so attractive. I know the market. I know the subs. I'm really good at building in this area of the country. And so I think that was part of his growth plan. You know, he recruited another owner operator before you know, he didn't move forward and to the brand, but he could either build them himself. He could act as a GC. He could flip them, or he could just sell directly or sell in partnership with us to build out the market. So really any of those avenues are available.
In short, on Mr. Stefan, would you say he failed to meet the brand standards that would have qualified him for the deal?
Once he was in the brand.
Or benchmarks, maybe. Perhaps he failed to meet benchmarks.
I would say he failed to meet the benchmarks to move forward.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's fair. Yeah.
Would you just give me a little insight? You know, the funniest thing is I actually ate at two Dickies and I thought it was a great concept. And that's in some ways how I stumbled upon this story. But I wanted to ask you while we're on the line here. Again, I'm not in this business. How does a franchise business like this decide to come to basically the New York City metropolitan area? Do you target certain parts of the state? And is this built on market research? Do you say, hey, there's a void in this market? Or is it more about finding that partner or that franchisee interested?
It's a great question. For us, it's always partnership first. It's franchise first. So that's where we're looking for folks that, again, want to be in the brand, that want to own their own Dickey's barbecue, that want to bring genuine, legit, authentic Texas barbecue that is smoked on site, that really have that passion. That's where we've been able to be successful for so long, grow as we have the partnerships that we have, and we have some great folks in the market up there. Gary Mulligan, I was just in his store about 6 weeks ago, and he has two locations in New Jersey, a Whiting and Mount Holly, and he's phenomenal. He's just a phenomenal partner. Oftentimes when I am in that market and have done some of the appearances on Fox News and some of the other cooking shows that we'll do up there, it's Gary that will drive in from New Jersey and bring the barbecue over for us to do the cooking segments with. So you know, he's an example of a fantastic partnership. Now, he came in as a single unit. He now has a second unit. You know, we have 4 active, excellent partners in that market. They came in, though, not as area developers. They came in as individual owner-operators.
Those 4 partners, where are they located?
So we have Gary is in New Jersey. He's in Whiting and Mount Holly. Aban is in Buffalo, New York. David Cirillo is in Norwich, New York. And then Bahra Patel is in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. And when I was in New Jersey again, seeing Gary, I took a look at a location he's considering in Hoboken.
Wow. Yeah. Egg Harbor is like Atlantic City. Could you how does Dickey's determine what's basically in the FDD and the lines about construction costs? Could you tell me a little bit about where you have different prices for different types of stores? I understand that, but where do those estimates come from?
They come from our experience. They come from what has most recently been our net average for those unit types. And then we also obviously have a range because the markets vary. You know, a Texas cost versus a Colorado cost is going to be different than a New York, New Jersey, or a California. So that's why there are ranges in there. But we do have 3 model types, whether that is the inline or the end cap or the freestanding. And then you also have that base plus range. So you might, some owner operators do, some owner operators don't opt to put in a beer and wine license. Some put in a full bar. Some don't want any part of that. Some have moved more towards a Delco, a delivery and carry out type of unit, and have very limited seating. That's probably what the location in Hoboken will end up being. That's very appropriate for that market. So we have those type of variations. And then it's also based on the most previous experience for what's happening in the market. You know, the commodities market for building materials as prices fluctuate. You know, certainly the pandemic had a very erratic, unforeseen spike, and a lot of contributing factors for shortages of materials, time lapses, you know, just costs all the way around. That was very unprecedented. So that certainly affected me. I look at those costs every year when we audit our FPD and submit that. It's regulated by the FTC. So we submit that with those ranges. We also are very careful to make sure that we are very explicit. This is based on our experience. It's based on our operating history, and most specifically the past year, but our overall history. But these are ranges and there are variables. And here is the decision points that you as a franchisee, or for us, an owner operator, impact those costs and those decisions.
Does Dickey's suggest contractors to franchisees locally?
It depends on the market. So we will cast out and give a list of, if it's requested. We certainly have that as a service that we provide. Some folks come with the experience, like for example, Jerry and John both acted as their own general contractors. They actually acted then as general contractors for others in that area. So it wasn't necessary. But then in other markets we do. And then in other markets, we'll find that partnership together, or an owner operator can submit a general contractor to us that will say, yes, we're looking for verifying that they're bonded, that they're insured, that they have you know, a legitimate business.
The pit equipment, a meat smoker, for example, are those typically purchased from preferred vendors of Dickey's?
Yes, we do have a set of preferred vendors for most of our spec equipment. So there's, for example, 3 pit makers that you can choose from that we know meet our specifications, our capacity, that will allow us to be able to train the owner operators on how to use any of those 3 models. But they do have a choice, so that we give those options.
On construction and equipment, does Dickey's receive some type of commission or compensation on the sale?
No, we don't.
Pardon me. What's the protocol typically when one of those pieces of machinery is defective, malfunctioning, preventing the store from doing the essential part, which I guess is smoking meat, right?
We hope so, most definitely, yes. So, you know, again, we work very hard with our partners to make sure that they can meet demand. However, it is definitely an agreement where the owner operator is buying that equipment. And so our role as the franchisor is to make sure that we add that extra layer in with the owner operator to deal with any vendor when there's any issue. So we will go in and we will advise on warranty, repair, and maintenance, and we will push and use our influence and our purchasing power to make sure that the owner operator goes to the front of the line, has excellent service. They have a partner in following up with any kind of vendor needs.
Does Dickey's have a I guess you would call it a uniform menu nationally? Is it the same menu everywhere you go?
We have a core menu. So we have a standard core menu, and then we also allow for local favorites so that an owner operator can submit and say, hey, I would like to add this For example, I opened some of the locations early on in New Jersey. And when I was there, I had no idea what Brunswick stew was. And I watched folks walk into the restaurant and say, oh, hey, where's your Brunswick stew? So we were 3 days in the market before I called chef and said, hey, we've got to have a Brunswick stew. And the owner operator was like, yes, we would love that. So we'll make those accommodations. For a little bit in the Carolinas, we had a mustard-based sauce. That thankfully was just eclipsed by our original sauce and our spicy sauce and our sweet sauce. So that actually phased itself out, but we will certainly go in and make those accommodations when it's right for the market and when the owner operator requests it. But we also find that the majority of our movers nationally are within our core market, because even though folks have that passion, that regionality, oftentimes once you get into a Dickey's and you try the brisket and you try the ribs, or you have a stuff maker, you fall in love with what we're doing.
Is who controls the sort of the online ordering platform for Dickey's?
Spark Hospitality Technology does. So that's a partnership that we have. We have most of our in-house tech is built by us. So while our payment systems are with an outside vendor, the tech itself is with Spark.
Is there any circumstances or a kind of a typical reason that, or if it ever happens, that Dickey's would take over a franchisee's online ordering platform or menu, control their menu somehow?
No. In fact, we have a lot of safety protocols for that. We have an owner operator dashboard, and they control that. So they control their menu. They set their pricing. They are in control of that.
So I spoke to a gentleman named Scott Rafer who owned a Dickey's in Freeport for less than 2 years. His claim is that at some point I guess you would say the board, the ordering board that he was in control of was taken out of his control. Item menus remained on his menu despite him not having the inventory. Is there any reason why the company would control a menu like that?
No, not in that way. In fact, we have a process that is a safety net to anything digital. So they can always reach out to their operations person, and their operations team member is there on call. In fact, we also have not 24, but 20-hour support. So they can reach out to the help desk and they can have that turned on or off when they make that request. So they have 2 lines to do that at all times. And that is always within their control through that mechanism.
So just to kind of document the point here, you're denying Scott Rafer's claim that Dickey's was ever in control of his menu.
In the way that you're phrasing it, absolutely.
So there was no time in which he did not lose access to edit the menu.
He had the same access that everyone does, so that he had the same ability to add items, to remove items, to sell out of items, to request local favorites. He just has to go through the process to do that, but he absolutely has the same control that any other owner operator has, and that they all function.
Is there a reason that on the FTD disclosures, any reason you would like to attach to closing 106 stores in 2024?
Well, the times, I mean, there's definitely looking at the pandemic and everything that was happening in the market. So, we always look for the best exit plan for any owner operator when they want to exit. Sometimes that's selling a location. Sometimes that's allowing a location to close. We didn't pursue those folks to fulfill their franchise agreements if it was in context of the situation that made sense.
Is there a reason why a franchisee's name would be removed from an FDD document?
I would have to know more context. I don't think I could answer that.
Yeah, we did get one report that a franchisee's name was removed from an FDD disclosure because they say they wouldn't have spoken favorably about Dickey's if someone had contacted them.
I cannot imagine that that is the case. I would have no knowledge of that, and no, I don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
Definitely, I don't.
No, know nothing about that.
Is there, I don't know, trying to be a little practical now. In retrospect, was entering the New York market a little risky for this brand? Would you have done things different from the beginning or even in the middle?
Yeah, I think that New York is still a very good market. New York and New Jersey are. We have successful partners there. We have our traditional locations. We have over 41 non-traditional locations in the market that I think is, as we have evolved the concept there, some of those non-traditionals absolutely make sense. I think we always learn hindsight. I definitely, we evolve so that we can continue to be successful. So I look at that market, and in hindsight, I'm not sure that I would have gone in with an area developer, but I also can't say that I wouldn't. Certainly that specific individual to begin with. Actually, both those individuals were not the right fit, but I don't necessarily think that that's the area developer model. Again, we have very successful area developerships.
Right. I was going to ask you that. Yeah. Then two more questions I have just kind of directly related here. Could you explain to me the breakdown of fees and royalties, marketing fees, and obviously corporate royalties? What's the typical number, would you say?
Sure. So it's a standard 6% in royalties and 3% in marketing fund. And the only time that that varies is when there is an area developership, and then that area developer will take a portion of the royalties for the work that they're doing.
Can you point to any examples just to document here where you've spent money for the marketing fees? Is there any example of where you did it in New York?
Oh, sure. So all the times that we've been on Fox News. So we spend that on PR, we spend it in digital advertising, we spend it in radio, we spend it in TV. Right now, we currently have a streaming on Amazon Prime on Advantages. So we run digital, we run traditional, and we run PR and SEO. We do a lot around placement for, as you know, the phone eats first nowadays. So when folks get online, we want to be able to find us, so we put a lot of research around our keywords so that when folks are looking for barbecue or they're looking for places for lunch or catering, we really put a lot behind there. But also, again, there's that national base in the branding, but then it's very market specific. Some markets might be terrestrial radio, some might be streaming, some might be more of a sponsorship market where you'll go in and you'll have Little League sponsorships or those sorts of things. So all of those, for example, happen currently in the brand.
Is couponing an avenue that you guys do, just out of curiosity, like direct coupon mailing or whatever it is?
We do, but it's very market specific. For example, take Oklahoma City. That's a hometown market for me, actually. That market is still a traditional market. They are still using their mailer coupons, and they still have print advertising, believe it or not, in the local Friday paper. And so, that market is very atypical, as my husband might say, to the very sophisticated market that Dallas is, where he grew up. But, so those marketing mixes are different. But yes, we do that.
Could you listen? I really do appreciate your time today. So thank you. But I just wanted to ask the two of you if you had any. I don't know if this will make the story, but it could. At any response to the New York Times article by Brett Anderson, was there anything in there that you dispute?
I dispute everything in there. And I think it's such a tragic mischaracterization of the brand, of our success, of us as a family business, and of all of our amazing, successful owner-operators. It took the unfortunate perspective of a very small group of folks without context, without question, and without any research or investigation, and presented their point of view as if it was representative for something that it wasn't. It is not characteristic of how successful we have been for almost 85 years. It is not characteristic of the franchising that we've been doing for over 30. It is not successful. It is not a characterization of all of the successful owner operators that we have. And such a tragic misrepresentation of all the good folks that run great businesses, that are successful, that are happy, that go in and work every day to build their business, serve great barbecue, serve a great product. They did not deserve to be characterized like that. We did not deserve that. It was very unfortunate, very misleading. I just don't even think it was reporting. I think it was just truly misleading.
I appreciate that answer, but I do have to ask, Wendy Williams and Scott Rafer. Unfortunately, Scott Rafer claims his house is being foreclosed on as a result of this. Is there a, could you acknowledge the pattern of unsuccessful people? Is that something that you could say is happening?
Actually, it isn't. It isn't a pattern of unsuccessful people. There are so many more successful people than there are unsuccessful people. The restaurant business is hard. The barbecue business is hard. Franchising is hard. Those folks made choices in context of their own business, and their outcomes are a product of their choices. And in both of those particular situations, we provided outstanding support. And you mentioned Wendy, so I will as well. And Monica can send over some documentation. For example, I was in her restaurant so much, so often, and had a I think she's a wonderful person. I hate the outcome that she had in her restaurants. I hate the timing. I hate the pandemic. I hate that she was not able to successfully build out the beach bar restaurant that she wanted. But, Wendy is just really, in the experience that I had with her, such a lovely person right up until she stepped off model, made her own choices, didn't take the advice that we offered, but we also subsidized Wendy. What was not included is the amount of money that we as a franchisor that had no obligation paid over $50,000 of bills for her to try to get her through, to try to get her to be successful, which we'll happy to provide that documentation for. But
Sure.
no one asked about that, and no one asked about the context. So when you look at the hundreds of other successful over so many years, they stayed on model. They worked as partners, not because we all agree every day. That's not what franchising is. But the folks that have outcomes that are atypical, they have made choices that are atypical. It's not a buffet of options, even though some of our stores serve buffet style food, you have to take everything and work it together. You also have to understand that, like within any business, there's risk, there's market factors. Nobody saw the pandemic coming. No one saw that. While we were able to pivot within the first 6 months and find a lot of traction and a lot of success, it definitely was a deeply painful time for everybody for many, many reasons. And we were not immune to that. But a lot of these particular folks, those that you mentioned, that was definitely a contributing factor. I don't think Wendy's a bad person at all. I think she just made choices that were against our advice and had an unfortunate outcome. And a lot of that was situation contributory.
Do you think it was similar with Scott Rafer's situation?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you also, and again, I appreciate you asking about that up front with just the ability to provide context for that, because if you look at his performance in particular in the stores, some of his Blaze audits, some of his operations audits, his talk to Dickies from his customers, Scott wasn't doing what Scott needed to do in his restaurant to be successful. That's why I very much don't like to speak ill of any owner operator, any franchisee, because I think a lot of them really came in with good intentions. They really mean to do the right thing. In fact, that is why the majority of our owner operators find great success. But if you step off model, or if you can't evolve with the market, with the times, with the guests, with the competition, those things are all factors. And the restaurant business is not easy, but it's a wonderful way to make a living. And we have so many folks that have current success, that have had wonderful, successful exits. And we have, all of those folks to share that story that is just much more representative of us.
I appreciate that. The very last thing I'm going to ask is a reiteration, something I wrote down here. Could you please, even just give 3 examples of what a benchmark for an area development deal would be?
So twofold to answer that. So a benchmark would be that they come into the system and they meet the brand requirements to be successful first in their own restaurant. So they have to meet operational standards. They have to be on program. They have to show their own success before they can go out and develop the market with other people's success. Then a secondary part of that requirement is that they have often agreed to a specific development schedule that would be market specific, size specific, depends how large the territory is, all of those sorts of things. That's negotiated up front, and they would have to meet those benchmarks as well.
Okay, I really appreciate your time. We're coming up on 40 minutes now. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I think we're done, and thank you so much.
No, Matt, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time to have the conversation and just ask the questions. My great hope is that you will really look at the situation in totality, and that you will look at all of the successful folks and talk to them and hear from them, because that really is just so much more of a representative picture of us. We didn't get to be almost 85 years old by accident. We haven't been franchising successful since 1994 by accident. We aren't in 41 states by accident. We aren't the largest barbecue brand in the country and the world by accident. That doesn't mean that we ever guarantee success, but it does mean that we're good partners with a great barbecue menu to offer folks.
Well, as I said, just before we go, listen, I am a reporter here in New York City. When we see something like the Times article, and then we have people following up with us on Long Island saying they experience, contacting us in some cases, saying they experience similar things, I just have a job to do, and ultimately to get your perspective is part of that job. So to be able to have somebody that at least gave a little corporate insight into why Mr. Stefan failed, and ultimately why it didn't work out for Mr. Rafer is, again, it's just part of my job. So what I'm trying to do is to gather simple statements from everybody involved. This is not going to be a 5,000 word story like the New York Times ran, but I just wanted to be at least upfront now with my intentions, just to get your side. I feel like you at least spoke to the reasons why those people weren't successful. So I appreciate your input.
Well, and I appreciate you asking that. I think that really goes the distance. I think that was the thing that was very sad about the Times article, that, again, you're clearly a reporter because you're asking the questions, you're doing the work, you're validating those things, you're looking at the context and the totality. And that was just something that the Times seemed not to be interested in doing. But that's probably why the Post is a better paper. So.
Did you Zoom with Brett Anderson like this? You did.
Had almost a 45-minute conversation with him.
No, I was just curious. Yeah, like I said, my story is smaller, and I'm really just addressing mostly the 2 people that were mentioned on Long Island, just in transparency's sake, so that you don't have to go on and on.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate that. My hope would be if you would talk to Gary Mulligan, if you would talk to David or Yvonne or Bahara. They're just
who's the person in New Jersey that you say is from your? I have 2 questions now. Okay.
Sure.
Who's the person from New Jersey that you say is happy with his store? I'd be willing to talk to him. Willing to talk to him. I have to ask you, because it's my job. Are you compensating these people in any way, even in a reduction in marketing fees?
No, absolutely not. No, and don't need to. No.
I'd be happy to talk. If Monica wants to send me that gentleman's number, I'd be happy to reach out to him today or over the weekend. That'd
be wonderful. And I just encourage you, Gary, well, again, any of the 4 folks, but Gary, Bahra, they're just good folks. They just deserve to really be able to I think put themselves, their work, their partnership, and their success, into the spotlight instead of having it be mischaracterized by folks that stepped off program.
Well, thank you so much for your time. If Monica can send along that contact for that gentleman, I'd appreciate it. And listen, I wish you all luck.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
as well.
Matt.